The air in the small Brentwood home is thick still. It's the stillness of a stopped clock. For in the morning, August 5th, 1962, the only light spills from a single bedside lamp, casting long, distorted shadows across a scene of profound silence. A telephone lies off the hook, its dull dial tone a mechanical insect hum in the heavy quiet. Next to it, an empty bottle of pills. Not just any pills. Nembutal, chloral hydrate, enough to silence a star. And in the center of it all, a woman. One hand rests delicately on the receiver, as if she had been reaching for a voice, a lifeline, in her final moment. Her famous platinum hair is splayed across the pillow like a tarnished halo. Marilyn Monroe is gone. But this is not the whole picture. This is the scene as it was found. The official story. A tragic, solitary end for the most famous woman in the world. But look closer. The room is too neat. The body's position too composed. There are no traces of water to swallow the dozens of capsules that supposedly ended her life. No glass, just silence and a creeping sense of wrongness. A detective on the scene would later whisper that it looked less like a suicide and more like a still life. A painting arranged by an unseen hand. To understand the mystery of her death, one must first understand the woman she was and the world she inhabited. Norma Jean Baker was long gone, replaced by the global phenomenon of Marilyn Monroe. She was the blonde bombshell, the breathy voice, the symbol of Hollywood glamour. But behind the incandescent smile was a woman fighting a war on multiple fronts. The year is 1962. The Cold War is a glacier of paranoia creeping across the globe. In Hollywood, the studio system is crumbling and the stars it created are vulnerable. And Marilyn? She's at a crossroads. Recently fired by 20th Century Fox from the film Something's Got to Give. Her marriage to the brilliant playwright Arthur Miller had ended in heartbreak. She felt used, discarded, a product past its expiration date. But she was also fighting back. She was studying, reading, yearning to be taken seriously as an actress. She had built a new home, this house on Fifth Helena Drive, a sanctuary she called her first real home. It was to be a new beginning, yet dark currents swirled around her. She had confided in friends about a little red book, a diary she kept. In it, she said, were her most private thoughts. But some of those thoughts were not just about love and loss. They were about powerful men. She had been involved with both President John F. Kennedy and his brother, Attorney General Robert F. Kennedy. Affairs conducted in the shadows of Palm Springs and secret penthouse suites. She was a living secret, a beautiful, volatile liability to the most powerful political dynasty in America. In the weeks leading up to that August night, her behavior was a study in contradictions. To some, she seemed deeply depressed, plagued by insomnia, her life a void, as she told one friend. To others, she was excited, planning a future, talking about remarrying ex-husband Joe DiMaggio, discussing new film projects. This duality is the first clue. Was she a woman on the brink of suicide, or a woman on the verge of a triumphant comeback? A woman who knew too much for her own good? The phone records from her final day tell a frantic story. Calls to her lawyer, trying to get her reinstated at Fox. Calls to friends, sounding upbeat. And then the final cryptic calls. One to Peter Lawford, the actor and Kennedy brother-in-law. Her speech was slurred, he would recall. She sounded distant, saying, "Say goodbye to the president. And say goodbye to yourself because you're a nice guy." Then, the line went dead. The official narrative would claim she died alone, sometime after 8:30 p.m. But the stories from the neighbors that night paint a different picture. They spoke of a dog barking furiously, of a loud argument at the house, of a distressed woman screaming, and of a mysterious vehicle, dark and official-looking, seen pulling away from the curb late into the night. The stage is set. The players are in place. The glamorous star, the powerful politicians, the shadowy figures lurking just off camera. The final act is about to begin, not with a whisper, but with a scream swallowed by the Los Angeles night. The silence of the death scene is broken by the shrill ring of the telephone. It's Eunice Murray, Marilyn's housekeeper. She's calling Dr. Ralph Green's son, Marilyn's psychiatrist. It's past 3 a.m. Murray says she woke up, saw a light under Marilyn's door, and found it locked. A sense of dread, she claims, compelled her to call. But the details shift even in these first moments. Later, Murray would change her story. Was the door locked? Or merely closed? Did she see the light through the door? Or through the French windows from the outside, where she noticed Marilyn's body? The inconsistencies are small, like hairline cracks in porcelain, but they will spread. Dr. Greenson arrives swiftly. He doesn't break down the door. Instead, he walks outside to the garden, to the French windows leading into Marilyn's bedroom. He peers through the glass. The sight that meets his eyes is the one that will launch 1,000 conspiracies. Marilyn lies prone, naked, covered only by a simple sheet. One hand is on the telephone. Her face is pressed into the pillow. Greenson uses a fireplace poker to pry open the window pane. The screech of bending metal tearing through the quiet night. He enters. He feels her skin. It is already cool to the touch. Rigor mortis has begun to set in. The clock is ticking, but not for Marilyn. For the story. Greenson's next call is not to the police. It is to Dr. Hyman Engelberg, Marilyn's internist, who had prescribed the Nembutal. Engelberg arrives, confirms the time of death, and then the two doctors make a decision that will forever cloud the investigation. They call the studio publicity department before they call the police. The Los Angeles Police Department receives the call at 4:25 a.m. Sergeant Jack Clemens is the first officer on the scene. He is a seasoned cop with a feel for the rhythm of a crime scene. And from the moment he steps into that house, he feels the discordant note. He finds the scene unnaturally sterile, too clean. The three others in the house, Murray and the two doctors, are, in his words, acting like actors who had rehearsed their parts. Clemens begins asking questions. The stories don't align. Eunice Murray is now busy washing sheets. Why? She claims she was doing laundry. In the middle of the night? Greenson is evasive. Engelberg seems nervous. Clemens examines the body. He notes the lack of vomit, the absence of a water glass. He sees the bottle of pills on the nightstand, but it is upright, its cap on securely. How does someone ingest 40 to 50 capsules without a single drop of water? How do they replace the cap in their final, agonizing moments? Most damning of all, Clemens asks about the time of death. Engelberg, who pronounced her dead, states it was around 12:30 a.m., But Clemens is trained, tells him the lividity, the pooling of blood in the body, the advanced rigor, suggests she had been dead for many more hours. Perhaps since before 10 p.m. This timeline is a seismic fault line. If she died earlier, then the stories of her final phone calls, the account of Murray waking up to see the light, all of it crumbles into dust. The official machinery begins to grind. The coroner, Thomas Noguchi, a young and ambitious deputy, arrives. The autopsy is a puzzle. Internally, he finds a liver showing signs of chronic drug use, but not an acute, massive overdose. The level of Nembutal in her blood is astronomically high, enough to kill several people. But her stomach and intestines are virtually empty of the yellow dye coating the capsules. The poison was injected or was administered some other way. There are no needle marks on her body. Noguchi is left with a paradox, a massive oral overdose with no physical evidence of ingestion. The press descends. The news breaks like a thunderclap across the world. Marilyn Monroe dead at 36. The initial reports call it an apparent suicide. The narrative is set before the investigation has even properly begun. The studio, the doctors, the powerful friends, all have an interest in a quick, quiet, tragic ending. A lonely star defeated by her own demons. It's a story Hollywood understands. It's a story America will accept. But in the background, other stories begin to leak. A private detective, Fred Otash, claims he was hired to bug Marilyn's house, to listen in on her conversations about the Kennedys. A woman named Jean Carmen, who claimed to be a close friend, would later say Marilyn called her that night, terrified, saying, "I'm afraid they're going to murder me." The official inquest, held weeks later, is a masterclass in closure. Key witnesses are not called. Sergeant Clemens's observations are dismissed. The coroner's office, under pressure, rules the death a probable suicide. The case is closed, but a question hangs in the air as palpable as the scent of gardenias that once filled Marilyn's room. If this was a suicide, why does every piece of evidence feel like it's been placed there by careful, deliberate hands? The stage has been cleared, but the audience is left wondering if the tragedy they just witnessed was real or a brilliantly staged performance designed to hide a much darker truth. The official verdict of probable suicide is a heavy door slammed shut, but it does not silence the whispers. Instead, it gives them an echo chamber. In the months and years that follow, the story of Marilyn Monroe's death refuses to fade into a simple Hollywood tragedy. It metastasizes, growing darker, more complex, and entangled with the highest levels of American power. The first crack in the official story comes from within. Sergeant Jack Clemens, the first police officer on the scene, cannot forget what he saw. He speaks out, a lone voice of dissent in the LAPD. He tells anyone who will listen about the washed sheets, the rehearsed actors, the impossible timeline. He becomes a pariah within the force, but his testimony becomes the bedrock of the murder theory. Then, the witnesses emerge from the shadows. They are a collection of fringe figures, disgruntled employees, and former lovers. Their credibility easy to attack, but their stories strangely consistent. Lena Pepitone, Marilyn's former maid, reveals a detail the official reports omitted. Marilyn, she said, was terrified of the dark and of being alone. She never locked her bedroom door, ever. So why was it locked, or seemingly locked, on the final night? The most explosive claims point directly to the Kennedy brothers. Peter Lawford, caught between his friendship with Marilyn and his loyalty to his powerful in-laws, would be haunted by her final phone call for the rest of his life. In confidential conversations, he hinted at a frantic cover-up. He suggested that after her death, a cleanup crew of Kennedy loyalists, perhaps including his own mafia-connected friend, entered the house to remove any incriminating evidence, letters, diary pages, tape recordings, that linked Marilyn to the president and the attorney general. The theory gains a sinister architect, Robert F. Kennedy himself. According to this narrative, RFK was in Los Angeles that weekend. He had visited Marilyn at her home to end their affair, a confrontation that turned violent. Perhaps he was present when she overdosed, accidentally or intentionally. Or perhaps, fearing the scandal she could unleash during his brother's presidency, he was involved in something far more deliberate. The mysterious dark car seen by neighbors? It was his security detail. The argument overheard? It was the Attorney General of the United States, silencing his greatest liability. But the Kennedys are not the only suspects. The shadow of organized crime looms large. Marilyn's alleged affairs with the Kennedys placed her at the center of a deadly conflict. JFK and his brother were waging a very public war on the mob, a war that some believe was a betrayal of a silent agreement. Mob support for the presidency in exchange for leniency. By associating with Marilyn, who is also rumored to have connections to mobsters through Frank Sinatra and his Rat Pack, the Kennedys had created a powder keg. What if the mob killed Marilyn, making it look like a suicide precisely to frame the Kennedys? To create a scandal so immense it would destroy them? It was the ultimate warning, a murder disguised as a tragedy, delivered from the underworld to the Oval Office. Then there's the CIA. The Cold War context provides the most chilling theory of all. Marilyn, in her quest for intellectual validation, surrounded herself with left-wing intellectuals. She was fascinated by politics. Was her diary more than just a record of romantic entanglements? Did it contain secrets she'd learned from pillow talk about Cuba, about assassination plots, about matters of national security? In the paranoid climate of 1962, a loose-lipped, emotionally unstable movie star connected to the president was not just a scandal. She was a national security risk. Her elimination, in this scenario, wasn't about sex, but about the sanctity of state secrets. It was a cold, clinical decision made by men who saw her not as a person, but as a breach that needed to be sealed. Each theory has its own evidence, its own believers, and its own gaping holes. The Kennedys had alibis, though shaky. The mob theory relies on layers of conjecture. The CIA angle ventures into the realm of the darkest conspiracy. Yet, the facts that refuse to fit the suicide narrative continue to glare like unblinking eyes. The missing red diary. The disappearance of the final days' phone records from the telephone company logs. The sudden death of key witnesses under mysterious circumstances over the following years. It feels less like a solved case and more like a narrative that was aggressively, forcefully imposed upon a much messier truth. The world wanted to believe in the tragic star. It was a cleaner, simpler story. But the whispers persisted, growing into voices then into shouts. The death of Marilyn Monroe was no longer just a Hollywood story. It had become an American mystery, a Rorschach test onto which the nation projected its deepest fears about power, corruption, and the fragile line between celebrity and sacrifice. The fallout is not a single event, but a slow, creeping stain. The official story holds, but it holds like a dam under immense pressure, with truth seeping through the cracks for decades. In the immediate aftermath, the key players scatter, their lives bending under the weight of the secret. Eunice Murray, the housekeeper, becomes a ghost. She gives contradictory interviews for years, her story shifting with each telling. One moment she's washing sheets at 3 a.m., the next she's knitting quietly outside Marilyn's door. The simple, grandmotherly figure becomes an enigma. Was she a frightened witness or a participant in a cover-up? She lives out her days a silent, haunted figure, her truth buried with her. Dr. Greenson and Dr. Engelberg, the two doctors who arrive before the police, see their professional reputations tarnished. The medical community questions their ethics, their judgment, their bizarre decision to call the studio before the authorities. They are pilloried in the press. They retreat from public life, their careers forever shadowed by the unanswered questions of that night. Their actions suggest not malice, but perhaps a panicked attempt to manage a catastrophe involving people far more powerful than they were. The Kennedy brothers continue their ascent, but a darkness now clings to them. Just over a year after Marilyn's death, President John F. Kennedy is assassinated in Dallas. Conspiracy theories bloom instantly, and many of them intertwine with Marilyn's death. Were both murders connected? Was the same hidden hand at work? 5 years later, Robert F. Kennedy is also gunned down. The two men most closely linked to the mystery are silenced forever, taking whatever they knew to their graves. Their tragic ends lend a grim, prophetic weight to Marilyn's final, slurred words to Peter Lawford. Say goodbye to the president. Peter Lawford himself is destroyed. Consumed by guilt and fear, he is effectively excommunicated by the Kennedy family. His career dwindles. He turns to alcohol and drugs, a hollowed-out shell of the handsome Rat Pack star he once was. He becomes a primary source for investigators and authors, but his stories are erratic, filtered through a haze of addiction and self-preservation. He dies a broken man, another casualty of that August night. The case is officially closed, but it is never truly investigated. The LAPD files are sealed. Key evidence vanishes. The public's appetite for the story, however, only grows. Books are published. Marilyn, The Last Take by investigative journalists Donald Wolfe and Anthony Summers painstakingly documents the inconsistencies, the witness intimidation, the likely presence of Robert Kennedy in Los Angeles. They present a compelling case for a cover-up that reached the highest levels of government. In 1982, the Los Angeles District Attorney is forced to reopen the case due to public pressure. The resulting report is a masterpiece of bureaucratic dismissal. It admits to irregularities, the strange behavior of the doctors, the missing phone records, but concludes there is no evidence of foul play. It is a victory for the official narrative, but a hollow one. The doubts are now institutionalized. The debate rages on, a battlefield of facts versus whispers. On one side, the skeptics, those who believe the murder theories are a fantasy, an unwillingness to accept the simple, sad truth of a mentally ill woman's self-destruction. They point to her history of pill abuse, her instability, her numerous previous suicide attempts. They argue the inconsistencies in the crime scene are the result of panic and confusion, not conspiracy. On the other side, the believers, those who see a pattern too clear to ignore. The silencing of witnesses, the impossible pharmacology, the powerful men with everything to lose. They argue that Marilyn Monroe was not a woman planning her death. She was a woman planning her future. She was negotiating a new $1 million contract with Fox. She was excited about a new house. This was not the profile of a suicide. The core of the mystery remains the same. A body found in a sterile room. A death ruled probable suicide with no evidence of how the lethal dose was ingested. Every theory, from the Kennedys to the mob to the CIA, is an attempt to fill that single, glaring void. Each theory answers some questions, but raises others more terrifying. The story of Marilyn Monroe's death ceases to be about a single night in Brentwood. It becomes a parable about America itself, about the corrosive nature of power, the fragility of truth, and the dark price of fame. It asks a question that echoes far beyond the confines of a Hollywood tragedy. When a nation's idols fall, do they jump or are they pushed?